Welcome to 5-Minute Mediumship, and in this video I wanted to look at why an audience member might not want to own a particular contact. So in this video, I wanted to look at audience members. I'd like to start looking at platform and platform etiquette, and audience is a really good way to start because sometimes the reason that somebody might not want to work on platform, particularly if they're not able to pinpoint directly who they're going to, is because they're afraid of nobody taking the contact. They get nervous if they've got giving lots of good information about a contact and nobody's putting their hand up to say, yes, that's with me. So I thought it would just be useful to look at 4 key reasons why that might be the case. Now, audiences nowadays have much greater access to mediums. There are more services, there are more demonstrations going on than ever before, and it's really rising in popularity. So sometimes an audience member can actually simply be waiting for more information. They might be waiting for a key, specific piece of information, or they might just want to wait more and more and get as much information as they can before they actually put their hand up to acknowledge that the contact you're working with is for them. Now, the key to get around this is actually obviously to have the information that you're throwing out to being relatively specific, or as specific as it can be, so that you're narrowing down the field so that it isn't general, and so that the person that the recipient the contact that the recipient is coming through for feels confident about owning and acknowledging that. The other thing that you can actually do if working like that, if you feel that your information is specific and it's still not being taken, is simply to stand firm and say that you know the contact is for someone, so you're just going to ask them to repeat some of the information, and at that point you'll find that you'll start to have somebody put their hands up and say that they can understand the information, or they can understand most of the information. Now, the other reason that you might have someone not want to take a contact is because it's a very close contact and they feel really emotional. As you're starting to speak, they're recognising the contact, and they might be experiencing the energy and the essence of that contact as well, and it's making them feel very emotional, and they don't want to be emotional in front of people that they might not know. Now, sometimes you can place this contact by giving information about the recipient that they will acknowledge. Very often what will happen is the contact will direct you to the recipient. So even if you're not someone that's usually directed, because the contact really wants to speak to their loved one, they will tend to direct you. If for whatever reason you can't place, invariably you will find that the recipient comes to speak to you afterwards and says that they're really sorry, they knew the contact was for them, but they were just too emotional to be able to acknowledge it. The third reason that people might not own a contact is because actually you're giving too personal information. So whilst we know that we're all really complex and the contacts in the spirit world are also really complex, we do have to be a little bit careful about the type of information that we give out on platform, because whilst there might be a handful of people that know each other, in most audiences you'll have a recipient that doesn't know a lot of people in the audience, and quite rightly they don't want all of their personal information and lots of very private information to be shared with people they don't know. So sometimes if you're being really specific with the information you're giving, but in a very personal sense, so talking about the fact that someone was an alcoholic, the fact that someone perhaps used to hit their wife or hit their husband, perhaps they ran up a lot of debt, if you're giving that information out when you're trying to place the contact, it may be that the recipient doesn't want to own it because they don't want the people around them to know that they're associated with that contact. And the last reason that people don't own a contact is because they actually genuinely don't recognise it. So it might be that the contact is actually for a friend, someone that's not with them that evening. So if you feel very strongly that the contact, the information that you're giving is right and is relevant, but it's not being taken, just check with the contact whether their direct recipient is in the audience and ask them to speak about the person that they want the information to go to. And in that case, what will usually happen is the recipient will recognise the information about the person here. They'll recognise it as a friend, as a family member, and they'll say to you, well, I understand the information, but I didn't know the person you were talking to. And then you can confirm whether it's a friend's relative that's passed, whether it's a family member that's passed that really belongs to a different recipient who couldn't be here this evening, but you understand the information they're wanting to bring through to the recipient, and they're willing to pass that on to you. Always remember that Spirit, when they're coming through for a reason, they're coming through for a purpose. So the person they need to get to, even if it's slightly indirect, is in the audience that evening. So just ask them to work with you, in a slightly different way, with slightly different information, if you can't seem to place the contact through the usual routes.